Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a continuation of what I've been working on with the Beaches and Book Readathon for 2024. So up to this point, I have the videos leading into the Readathon. That was throughout the month of July. And then I have my recap video, which includes the 12 books that I aimed to read and the 10 books that I did read, some review and synopsis on those books. And then now we're at the point where I'm just going over each individual book and talking about my thoughts for the book, a little synopsis, and just like a little sneak peek for you by me reading a few quotes from the book. So today's focus is going to be on King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Just a couple quick details about the book. I read this one for the prompt, book with the sun or yellow on the cover. And the author, of course, is Roger Lancelyn Green. And the genre is fairy tale, folklore, fiction, adventure books, and its AR reading level is 7.7. So again, the average 7th grader in the 7th month can read this book with 85% comprehension. A little bit of background on this to start with. So this version is a retelling of these stories and these legends about King Arthur that were written I think in the 1400s. And what's really fun about this is the author, Roger Lancelyn Green, was part of a writing group in England called the Inklings. And if that sounds familiar for you, you are likely a fan of C.S. Lewis and R.R. Tolkien, because they are famously part of that writing group. You definitely see themes within Lewis's books, especially the Narnia series. You see themes with Lord of the Rings, and it's like, who came first, who knows, but you can just picture these men sitting together, probably like smoking their cigars or pipes, talking about literature and bouncing ideas off of each other on how to create an amazing fantasy story. And so now for a little bit of a synopsis of the story. So King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table are just a series of legends that have been retold orally for years and years and years. No one actually really knows when they first started. What we do know is that at some point they were written down in French, and then in the late 1300s, early 1400s, let me get his name right, Thomas Malory translated them from French to English in his book Les Mortes d'Arthur. So I apologize if I'm butchering that. And in these original retellings and these original stories, they were actually just kind of like what it seemed like. And I'm not a literature major, so forgive me if I'm wrong. This is just kind of my observations and then what I've kind of put together from what I have read. But it seems like there's all of these like individual little quests and adventures, and they do kind of have a cohesiveness to them, but it's not really a strong cohesiveness. And it almost kind of feels like you could read 1 or 2 chapters and feel like you get a complete beginning, middle, end in that. And the author of this book, he actually kind of acknowledged that, and this is what he said. He wrote in his introduction, "It has recently been shown that Malory himself did not write his book of King Arthur as a single narrative, but merely as a collection of quite separate stories based on a variety of old French romances. There is a certain coherence, but not a fixed plan. So now I have endeavored to make each adventure a part of one fixed pattern: King Arthur's kingdom, realm of Orgus, the model of chivalry and right, striving against the barbarianism and evil which surrounded and at length engulfed it." Okay, so what I'm taking from that is Lancelyn Green took all of these kind of individual, like separate stories, as he said, and then put them together in a way that there is a cohesiveness to it. And you see the strand that runs through that with the quest for the Holy Grail, that the story kind of culminates into that. And so, it really does read like that. It really does read like you could read these individual parts and still feel satisfied with the story. And you could read the whole book and see where it has this culminating end with the quest of the Holy Grail. Now let's talk about some themes and some key takeaways that you will have when you read this book. So the first one is courage. There's definitely a lot of themes of courageous acts, but also battling in with your inner temptations and inner desires. There's faithfulness and betrayal, chivalry, of course, and living by a certain code that includes honor and respect, heroism. And one of the biggest themes that I saw were this warning against complacency. And when we're complacent, we're actually the weakest. And I think there are some warnings for us when we are in those situations to be on high alert. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some quotes. We'll see how many end up staying. I tried to limit it to 3, and I think I have like 12. So I'm not going to do that to you, but we'll see what ends up staying in there. So this next portion is going to be a quote from Merlin. And if you were following along or kind of just thinking in terms of what I was mentioning about the images of Christ in the novel, we would see Merlin as the image of Christ, but maybe the Holy Spirit or a prophet, because he really serves as somebody who gives a lot of prophecies at the beginning of the story. And this part that I'm going to read is when King Arthur sees Guinevere and wants her as his wife. And so this is what Merlin says about that. "Certainly she is among the fairest," said Merlin. "Yet I would that you loved another, for by her very beauty shall come the end of Logros. When the best knight of your court shall love her, bringing shame upon her and upon himself, bringing war between you and him, bringing in the day when the traitor of Camlin shall triumph, not long after the coming of the Holy Grail, which shall be a sign that the glory of Logros is at hand, and its passing also. Yet Guinevere is the fairest lady in all the world, and when a man's heart is set upon such a damsel as yours is upon her, he will not be turned." Okay, and if you've read the book, and it's not a spoiler alert because that's page 52, and it is a warning of what is to come. And you know at the beginning that this great time of King Arthur and his knights is going to come to an end, and it's going to come to a tragic end, and it's going to come to a tragic end because of the betrayal of one of his knights, and not just any knight, but his best knight. And oh, it is just so sobering. So let's go ahead and keep going. There's a few more that I want to. The next part comes from one of my favorite parts in the book, and one of my favorite knights is Sir Gawain. And I don't know exactly how to say his name, but we're gonna go with Gawain. And you can tell me in the comments how to say it if you know how to say his name better. But anyways, he kind of gets a little bit tricked into fighting this certain knight, and he is on his way to fight this knight that is cruel and undefeated up to this point. And so there are other people who are warning him and telling him not to fight the knight, and this is his response. "Sir," said the squire, "go no further, I beg of you. Near here dwells the Green Knight, a terrible and cruel man. There is none so fierce or so strong in this land, and no man may stand against him. Over yonder at the Green Chapel, it is ever his custom to say to all who pass by and fight with them and kill them, for none can escape him. Flee away now, and I will not tell ever that you fled for the fear of the terrible Green Knight." "I thank you," said Gawain, "but I must go forward. I would be a coward and unworthy of knighthood if I fled away now. Therefore, whether I like it or not, I must go forward, and God knows well how to save his servants, if so he wills." Okay, so again, we have that just image of responsibility and commitment and sticking to your word, because it was something that he promised that he would do. And then that ending, I mean, if you don't hear Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and standing up against King Nebuchadnezzar saying that our God knows how to save us if he wills, or even Esther, "If I perish, I perish." If you don't hear those themes coming through that statement and that resolve of, I will do what I am supposed to do, and I will do what is right, and God has the power and authority and ability to save me. If he chooses, he will, but I will be obedient regardless. And I mean, those themes come through so strongly. Here's one more quote that I think really kind of highlights some of the chivalry and dedication here. So this is by Gareth, and he's another one of my favorite knights. And he says, "I may be beaten or slain," said Gareth gently, "but flee will I never, nor leave you until this adventure be accomplished." And I love that. It's like, it doesn't matter if I am beaten, if I am killed, but one, I am never going to leave you, and two, I'm not leaving this adventure. So, I mean, if that doesn't speak to your heart, I mean, I don't know. So now we're gonna get into some of the heavier parts that was foreshadowed at the beginning. And again, it just breaks your heart. There are so many themes that you will see from the life of David throughout this, and not with King Arthur, but with his knights. And just time and time again, you definitely see the parallels between the life of King David and some of the knights and different storylines throughout. So this one says this: "But as the years rolled by, fewer and fewer needed help. The peace of true and holy state settled more and more surely upon Logros, and King Arthur's knights spent more and more of their time holding great tournaments at Camelot or Carlisle, growing more and more skilled in arms, it is true, but finding less and less cause to prove their prowess. Most of the younger knights rode out all over the country in quest of adventures, but the older ones waited more and more for some great thing to befall, and foremost among these was Lancelot." And again, I just see David. I see David, instead of fighting how he was supposed to, staying home and being complacent and letting his guard down. And that is when trouble comes into our homes. So this is Lancelot later, because Lancelot indeed is going to make some poor decisions that prohibits him from having access to the Holy Grail, which is representative of God in the story. And it just highlights how our sin separates us from access to God. So of course we are loved by God, and we our position and salvation doesn't change, but our access can be hindered by our sin, and that needs to be acknowledged and confessed and repented before we have that full access. And so I think that this is so great, where it shows that he can only get so close to the Holy Grail because of his sin, and just feeling that heaviness and remorse in that. And so Lancelot says, "My sin and my wickedness have brought me into great dishonor. When I sought only after worldly adventures, there was no quest too hard for me to accomplish. But now that I seek for holy things, my great sin comes between me and them, and I have no power to stir or speak when the Holy Grail drew near me." And I mean, it gives me chills, right? Like, our worldly adventures, we can do that. But as soon as we speak spiritual things, the sin in our life must be confessed and dealt with to have full access. And that just gives me the chills. And here's the last quote that I'm going to read from here. And this is King Arthur stating this towards the end of the book. And he says, "Comfort yourself," answered King Arthur, "and do as best you may. For you remain to bear word of me and those who are yet alive. For I must go to the Vale of Avalon, there to be healed of my grievous wound. But be you sure that I will come again when the land of Britain has need of me, and the realm of Logros shall rise once more out of the darkness. But if you hear never more of me, pray for my soul." Then the barge floated away into the mist and was lost to sight. But a strange low cry of mourning came over the waters until the sadness passed from it, and it was lost in a quiet whisper beyond the distance. And so it ends with hope, right? It ends with, but I'm going to be needed again one day. And in Britain's great time of need, I will be back. And that is King Arthur. All right, just to think about some warnings about the book, or some things that you might want to just be aware of when you come in. So there is some romance. I mean, it's knights and saving damsels and things like that. So of course you are going to have some romance. But the most significant thing that you are going to come across as you read this book is the affair between Lancelot and Queen Guinevere. And it is written in a way that probably only adults can really pick up. It is devastating, it is heartbreaking, It serves as a warning and a caution for decisions that we make and how we live our life. I think for most kids, it's probably going to go over their heads how it's written, but it is present. So other than that, it was just written a really long time ago. It was written at a time where people used different vocabulary and different sentence structures and different words to explain things. So it does require a degree of patience and sometimes looking up words that we might not be familiar with, but overall I think well worth the read. I think it is definitely a story that should be woven into the hearts of children. I think these stories are timeless and will stay in your heart forever and serve as inspiration and warning. So I definitely highly recommend it, and until the next video, we'll see you soon. Bye.